Well, good evening, IFL Nation, and welcome to tonight's stream. We are back in the friendly confines of the lab, your weekly source for the rundown of all things Indoor Football League. Whether you're looking for the recap of the week that was, the previews of the week that is to come, or are interested in any of the other great goings on of this amazing league, you have stumbled upon the right place. It is a balmy evening on a Thursday here in the southeastern part of the Bay State, but we are geared up for another edition of Wager Wednesday in the Indoor Football League. Thank you so much for tuning in, taking some time out of your evening to spend with me, an old schmuck that likes to talk indoor football. For those of you who are new to the league or maybe finding this channel for the first time, I want to warmly welcome you aboard. My name is Alex Schuberth. I am a huge fan of the indoor football and arena football game, if you couldn't tell already. But that is a passion that I've channeled into my current role as lead IFL contributor for Sports Coast to Coast, which is a Pacific Northwest-based sports forum site that specializes specifically in the coverage of the indoor football team and its indoor football league and its 14 member teams. Each week, our staff will bring you up-to-date team rosters, game previews, game recaps, and a wide variety of other analysis out there, including some breaking news developments as they happen. So if you are a fan of the Indoor Football League, Sports Coast to Coast is a go-to to get your dose of everything relating to the league. I've linked the site below in the description. It is there where you'll also find the written version of my Wager Wednesday piece, which I published in the late stages of yesterday afternoon. So if you're more of the reading type rather than the video type, the link is down there for you as well to go check that out at your leisure. So, with that said, I say we hop into the reflection piece of the night. Just get that up and running here. Fantastic. So we are here. It is the teenage weeks, you could call it, of the Indoor Football League season. A bunch of teams rising up to maturity and others trying to find that stage in terms of a potential playoff push. We have all except for one team in the IFL either in a playoff position or within 2 games of a playoff berth. So nobody's truly out of it yet. We probably won't see our first official elimination until, if I were to guess, July, maybe late June. But in any event, we still have a ton of spectacular football left. So without further ado, let's dive right in. We're going to start things off with a recap of Week 12. We had a full 7-game slate. We had a trio of 60-something to 20-something blowouts. We had a bunch of wagers that came down right to the final second or the final play. And then we had a little bit of history made, actually, as we had 2 favorites of 3 or more touchdowns wind up covering, which had only happened once in the 3 years of IFL betting prior to last week. So we'll go over all of that in the detail it deserves in just a little bit. We'll add those 7 games to the population of games played so far this season, for which the count has reached 65 games. So we'll take stock of how we've done so far, what promises and pitfalls lie ahead, and see if we can improve on all 3 of our bet types, from money lines to spreads, and in particular, point totals, which we will get to in just a little bit. So once we've recapped all of that, we'll dive right in. We've got Week 13 on the card, 6 games to preview and show all of the storylines therein. 4 games on Saturdays, so there's no Friday game this time around. So unfortunately, nothing tomorrow. We will have to wait until Saturday kicks in. We will go through each of those 6 games in detail, make our predictions therein, and then come up with a 3-leg parlay in a bid to cash our 3rd winner in that department of the season. All right, so week 12. The first game to go down was a Friday night at Green Bay, where the Blizzard hosted the San Antonio Gunslingers in what was the first of 3 interconference matchups to take place. San Antonio came in desperate for a win. They started off reasonably strong. They ended up getting a couple touchdowns on their first 2 possessions, but that Green Bay offense scored a touchdown far more frequently on the chances that they had. They just put San Antonio's defense completely out of place all evening long, particularly in a second half that saw the Blizzard end on a 37-7 run. In a half that featured 2 interceptions as well as a turnover on downs. I want to say that Cole Stenstrom actually got the final possession for the Blizzard, but player of the game easily in that one was Kyrie Robinson, the running back filling in for the injured Demylon Brown and putting together 5 total touchdowns on the evening. That effort ended up pacing Green Bay's win. Final score there, 62-28. Again, it's Green Bay at home, and they cover yet again, adding to that sterling mark ATS whenever the Blizzard suit up in the friendly confines of the Resch Center. So that game kicked off the week and led to a 4-game Saturday bonanza, which got started with a 6 o'clock Eastern kick between the Iowa Barnstormers and the Tulsa Oilers. This game, Iowa was feeling pretty good going in. They had just come off their season best in terms of offensive point scoring. Unfortunately for the visitors, that momentum came to a screeching halt in the oil field against Tulsa's defense. They put up just 7 in the first half. The Oilers getting out to a big 35-7 halftime lead. They increased that to 42-7 with their first possession of the second half. And from that point on, it was purely academic. In fact, Clifton McDowell started the game for Iowa, but Coach Andre Coles decides to give Dante Avila Santos the majority of the second half snaps behind center. And it did seem to generate a tad bit of momentum there for the Barnstormers. In fact, just enough to get our over bet to cash. It came down to a 4th down and goal from the Oilers' 2-yard line, about 15 to 20 seconds left on the clock. Had to have the touchdown. We were short by the half-point hook. Avila Santos gets it done, takes the keeper barely across the goal line. They actually review the play. Rulings upheld. And for the Iowa Barnstormers, it's a touchdown, but didn't really change the outcome of the game all that much. One that saw the Oilers absolutely dominate to the tune of a 63-29 victory. That score at the very end, cashing our over bet and narrowly avoiding a by the hook loss. Speaking of which, we move on to our next game on these recaps, the premier Eastern Conference clash of the week between the Fishers Freight and the Jacksonville Sharks. These 2 teams 2 weeks ago out in Fishers put together an unbelievable clinic of offense in a 68-50 affair. This matchup in Jacksonville saw the defenses take their turn to shine. Impressive performance by both teams, getting a couple interceptions apiece, which really set the tone for this game as, who was going to come up with the ball last on a clutch play. In a game that Jacksonville led throughout, Fishers ends up taking the lead in the 4th quarter. They actually have an opportunity to put the game away, not too dissimilar from what they did at home 2 weeks ago. This time around, though, the Sharks defense stands strong. They force a missed field goal attempt, and then with about 9 seconds left on the clock, they run in Jimmy Robinson for a touchdown, but the PAT is missed left by Marc Orozco, and it's not an understatement to say that miss meant a lot for some folks. As for the Jacksonville Sharks, they ended up blocking Callum Sutherland's game-winning field goal attempt for the Freight right at the buzzer. So the Sharks get away with the win, their 8th straight, 36-34. But that one missed extra point at the end, making us think what could have been had we just eaten the juice and taken the minus 155. But a little bit of an unfortunate blow there, but nonetheless, we move on to Northern Arizona at Arizona. Another tough matchup for the Wranglers against a legitimate Western Conference contender. To Northern Arizona's credit, they struggled really badly to start against San Diego, but they had no such trouble getting off on the right foot of this contest. In fact, they actually score on each of their first 4 offensive possessions, at least keeping pace with the Rattlers. Late in the first half, the Wranglers were actually within 1 point, looking very competitive, very live for an upset, possibly, if some bounces went their way. Instead, from about the 30-second mark of the second quarter to maybe the end of the third quarter, it was all Arizona Rattlers. They string together a touchdown to close out the first half, 2 straight interceptions off Anthony Garrett to begin the second half. They take both of those in for touchdowns, and before you knew it, Arizona had pushed themselves into cover territory. In what was a very low tempo second quarter as far as possession count goes, the outcome of our bet, the under at 85.5, was decided on, I believe it was Northern Arizona's penultimate drive, in which backup quarterback Debo Bryant found Marlon Cook in the corner of the end zone for a deep touchdown. That pushed the game's total over. That ended up being the final scoring play of the game, as a matter of fact, as the Rattlers improved to a 7-3 mark on the season by defeating the Wranglers, their in-state rivals, 56-32, the final there. We miss out on our under wager by a mere field goal. So after an encouraging start to the week, we had 2 bets miss, one by the field goal, the other by the hook. And that brought us to our mortal mega of the week, which was Orlando at Tucson, in which we took the Sugar Skulls at plus 8.5. Now, for the Skulls, they never actually trailed in this game. This was the debut of Jerome Johnson following his trade from New Mexico to Tulsa, and then from Tulsa over to Tucson. And the 2024 IFL MVP lit things up incredibly well in that first half. Tucson gets 34 points on the board. That matches the 34 that Orlando put up to bring us to a deadlock at halftime. The second half, though, defined by the opening kick of the third quarter, in which the Sugar Skulls, with new kicker Ben Woodard, able to bank it off of the right post into the field of play. The Sugar Skulls recover with the Mod Lions, and then one play later, they get into the end zone for a touchdown to take the lead. And that play absolutely shattered any momentum for the Orlando Pirates, as they only scored 3 points from that point onward, including a couple of interceptions off the arm of Paxton DeLaurent. To make matters worse for the Pirates, they absolutely lost their composure on the final drive of the game. Multiple unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. Just not a great look, not a great night for Orlando, but for Tucson, it is a galvanizing, season-saving win, one that brings them to a tie for 4th place with the Gunslingers in the Western Conference standings. The upset win of the week comes by a 53-37 final. The game also staying below the implied total of 90.5, despite a 68-point first half. So wild development there for anybody that had any side of that over-under total. So that did give us some momentum heading into Sunday's doubleheader, which kicked off with a San Diego at New Mexico showdown. Nate Davis's much-awaited return to the state of New Mexico, where he had spent a number of seasons quarterbacking the Duke City Gladiators at a near all-IFL, all-CIF level. The start to this game, to say that it was surprising, doesn't really do it justice all on its own. New Mexico took the opening kickoff of the game, or the opening possession of the game, rather. They turned that into a go-ahead touchdown and then they end up stopping San Diego twice in a row on downs, limiting Nate Davis to just 1 of 8 passing to begin the game. They get 2 more touchdowns, and lo and behold, it's the second quarter. The Chupacabras are up 19 points. Exactly the sort of trap game narrative where you could look at that and say, okay, not San Diego's night. But nope, not Taylor Jennis's crew. Not on his watch. The strike force recover quickly with a couple of big plays on offense, 2 interceptions defensively in the second quarter, one of which was returned for a touchdown by Devin Hafford with about 5 seconds to go in the half. That defensive touchdown giving the strike force a 2-point halftime lead. So they outscore the Chupacabras by 21 after falling behind 19-0. And then from that point onward, they had the opening possession to start the second. They went and got touchdowns on each of their first 4 possessions. Now, the Chupacabras responded well to the first 3 of those touchdowns. The fourth being a drive on the final minute of the game that saw Donovan Portery's Hail Mary pass intercepted by Elijah Reed, who had 2 interceptions on the contest. In that play, ends up preserving a unconventional but effective nonetheless win for the San Diego Strike Force, taking this one 55-45 over New Mexico. So the Chupacabras have now lost 6 straight games, whereas the Strike Force are now winners of 7 of their past 8 ball games to maintain a half-game lead over the Arizona Rattlers for second place in the West. And then we wrapped up the week with another non-conference showdown, the Quad City Steamwheelers, out on the West Coast for the second time this season, taking on the Vegas Nighthawks, the defending champions, coming back after their uplifting IFL Cup championship the week before. And I will say this much of the 60-something to 20-something blowouts that we had, this one followed a very similar vein to its 2 predecessors in that the Steamwheelers were actually competing very well in the game's first 30 minutes. They held the lead up until early in the second quarter. They stayed within striking distance. The deficit was only 9 at the half, but after that, Vegas scores a touchdown to make it a 16-point lead. Quad City comes back with a touchdown of their own, but that would actually be their final scoring play of the game. That's right. From that point on, Vegas completely shuts Quad City out. They end on a 23-0 run, which on its own would have nearly been enough to cover that 23.5 spread. But already armed with a 10-point advantage prior to that, the Steamwheelers just completely ran out of gas here. So the Nighthawks cover the largest favorite spread of the season with their 61-28 victory over the Quad City Steamwheelers. So that exciting game brought the week to a close. A lot of close calls there, but we ended up on the wrong side of one too many of those. 3-4 for the week. Our net loss margin drops a little bit more, although the weighted method actually gained a little bit of ground despite the losing record. And that's thanks to our 3rd straight Mortal Megamax win. We backed Tucson at home as underdogs against an Orlando Pirates franchise that has been woeful ATS on the road, particularly as favorites, as they are now 2-15 ATS in that scenario. So we add to the number of losses that have been decided by 1 possession or fewer as well, with 17 of our 33 losses there. And it really goes to show a situation where we get bounces to go our way on even 5 of those. We're looking at a potential record of anywhere between the 37-28 range or the 38-27 range. So we have had a bunch of near misses this season. It's been a little bit of an unfortunate grind, but entering this week, we are 32-33 with much work to do in terms of improving our betting on underdogs on the spread, as well as both ends of the point total. So, like I said, we've got our work cut out for us. So all we can do is move forward, Trust the numbers and trust our instinct. Our 3-leg parlay of the week, it was our another attempt at a repeat for the first time in series history. Unfortunately, our attempt never got off the ground. As the same goes with the offenses of the Freight and the Jacksonville Sharks. We took the over at 93.5 there. Game total 70 points in Jacksonville's 36-34 win. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we took San Diego, New Mexico under 83.5 on the heels of 5 straight Chupacabra unders, but armed largely by the fact that the Chuba offense coming back to life, along with San Diego's offense doing its thing, we ended up getting another 100-point game here. So 2 straight over-under defeats to begin things, and then Vegas scoring a late touchdown in their game, 61-28, totaling 89 points to at least prevent the reverse sweep. So a little bit of a something to feel good about, but never a great feeling when a parlay attempt goes for naught, especially when it crumbles on the first leg. There's always that debate, too. Would you rather lose on the first leg or lose on the last leg? I say, let's lose on either and just win the whole thing. But such was not the case for this past week. And we just got to gear up for another attempt this week, which will wrap up the night. Our year-to-date results so far are illustrated below. We've had a couple consecutive down weeks since week 10. So you see that flat method kind of sliding downwards there a little bit near the 6 unit of net loss mark, whereas that weighted method has been on a slight upward trend since week 8. So as long as we continue hitting those mortal mega max bets, the weighted method is in a prime position to perhaps finish the season as the more lucrative of the 2 betting methods for the 2026 season. So we've been in far worse situations than this. 2024 comes immediately to mind when I think of it, but time's running out for us to start that run of positive results to close out the season. So that's where the mindset is at. All right, our yearly results so far shows a pretty convincing trend here in terms of the favorites. They actually outperformed expectations last week as well. I believe their ending record was 5-2 against the spread, which improves their overall record to 35-30 against the spread. So we've seen a lot of crooked numbers. We saw 22.5 covered last week. We saw 23.5 covered last week. Are those numbers not enough, realistically? So that's something that we're going to have to think about critically in the event that we do get more numbers like that in the future. But again, the big trend, home teams, home teams, home teams. If you are unsure about a bet, just take the home team, probably against the spread, and see what happens. Covering at 67% on the spread and 66% on the money line. In addition, those money line favorites have been red hot. They are converting at a very disproportionate 74% rate. Now, remember, the past 3 years have seen favorites win about 66% of the time. So that's telling us that that pool of favorites, if executed properly, does offer a little bit of cash flow where it otherwise would not. So is that something that we tap into a little bit more moving forward, even though they might not be the most popular critical thinking plays out there? But in any event, much like the favorites on the spread, the overs have been on a pretty solid run so far. Again, 35-30 overall. And once again, we kind of see that magic number from a league-wide standpoint of 86.5 or 87.5, depending on which game you take. That one number so far this season has resulted in a near 20% difference in its efficiency in cashing the over. So we see that 63% result for 86.5 or less, and then that drops all the way down to 43.3% when you take that number to 87.5 or greater. So league average so far this year is right spot on at 86.5. The average over under has been set at 86 on the dot. So from that lens, relatively unsurprising that the over has a slight lead so far. And again, that unders setting right there should be 30 and 35, not 30 and 25. That'll be a typo corrected for next time. But yeah, again, home teams are the preferred play if you're just hopping in. Last week they went 6-1 straight up and 6-1 against the spread. Of course, the only team that didn't cover or win as the home team, let me think, that was, God, why am I blanking out? I'll figure it out later, but no need to tattle on for that much longer. Last part before we move on here, home underdogs, massive advantage for new players here. Last week we saw two home underdogs cover their spread. We had Tucson with the outright win, and then we also had New Mexico with the covering of the spread at plus 13.5 was the number, and they kept it within 10. Got a little bit scary at the end because they did have that 19-point lead that they ultimately blew, but still held on for anybody who had the number. All right, now we go to our team-by-team trends. If you're a spread better, look no further than the Vegas Nighthawks and the Green Bay Blizzard, both of whom are on cover streaks of 4 games or more. And in the case of Vegas, they have now covered in 8 consecutive ball games. That is actually one shy of the all-time record, tracking back to statistics from the 2023 season when IFL betting made its maiden voyage. The Tulsa Oilers, also not too shabby, with a 6-3 against the spread record. So very profitable for those who have stuck with them since day one. It's been a bit of a rougher go for teams like San Antonio, Quad City, and Iowa, with the Gunslingers and the Steamwheelers each on ATS losing streaks of 4 games or more. From the over-under standpoint, we now have Tucson as the most profitable team to the under this season, with 6 of their 9 games falling under so far. On the opposite end, teams like the Strike Force, the Pirates, and the Nighthawks, very profitable for overbetters with a conversion rate of at least 66%, and those teams averaging at least 91 points per their games overall. So all of those numbers continue to change. We're going to see how they kind of evolve as these last 8 weeks of the season move along here, but this is what we got so far for numbers. And here are our results by team so far. The big bugaboo here is the Jacksonville Sharks, for which we have only gotten 2 of our 9 picks correct. And we have missed out on their ATS bets with a 0-4 record so far. The struggle has been equally as real, if not more so, in our Northern Arizona over-under bets, which have gone 0-5 so far. So definitely some things that we'd love to see get on the win column here, even though we haven't attempted them nearly as much on the totality of the season so far. But we do at least have 2 teams at that 7-win mark at this point in the season, with Arizona and San Antonio joining that club last week. So each week is going to bring an opportunity to push more teams home. We can do that with all 4 of the teams that are currently at 6 betting wins right now, with the Sugar Skulls, Blizzard, Pirates, and Steamwheelers among the teams that we could bring to potentially get ourselves nearly halfway to our goal. All right, it is now time for our weekly disclaimers here. The lines and odds that we're going to use today are going to come from DraftKings Sportsbook. This is a series rooted purely in education and fun and messing around with the numbers. It's not meant to be a tool with which to make money. It's not meant to be construed as betting advice. As we've seen so many times in the past, there's no such thing as a guarantee or a lock in the sports wagering world. So if you are playing, please be careful, please be responsible, and practice gambling legally. In most jurisdictions, you must be 21 years of age or older to play. If you would like to tail or fade the selections that I'll be sharing with you tonight, you're more than welcome to do so, but I highly suggest practicing safe habits that include setting a budget in terms of both time and money. Risk only what you can afford to lose. And if you feel like you or a loved one is maybe teetering upon a problem gaming or a gambling addiction issue, there's lots of resources online and issued by your respective state that offer assistance and resources in that area. Responsibleplay.org is one example. Haveagameplan.org is another. There are some great tools there that debunk gambling myths. And like I said, offer resources to those who feel like they truly need it. So if you feel like you're in that boat, know that you are not alone and that help and support is out there. With that said, there's our half dozen games on the big board. Let's delay no further and get right to our previews and predictions here. Before we hop on, I want to welcome in both Monica and Chucky for hopping on tonight's stream. Really appreciate you being here. Again, drop your hot takes for the week if you'd like. Certainly more than happy to discuss the opinions and foster up some discussion there. All right, let's get cruising here. We've got Saturday's opener. This is a 4 o'clock afternoon kickoff that sees the Iowa Barnstormers make the trip to Orlando to play the Pirates for the only encounter between these two Eastern Conference rivals this season. The spread favors Orlando at home at 13 in the hook. The over-under is the highest of the week at 96.5. On the money line, Iowa's plus 575 and Orlando is minus 850. Unfortunately for the one-win Barnstormers, it seems like it's back to the drawing board at that quarterback spot. We've seen it at least 3 times now, possibly 4 if you count Harry Rubidoux, where the Barnstormers get something of an encouraging outing out of one of their signal callers, and then they wind up being unable to sustain that momentum into the following game, causing Coach Andre Coles to revert to the other option, the alternative, later in the game. That scenario reared its ugly head once again for the Barnstormers in their last trip to Tulsa, where Clifton McDowell, after leading Iowa to a season-high 48 points, winds up being yanked in favor of Dante Avila Santos in the second half of that one. So the Barnstormers' road woes have certainly continued into this season. In fact, they have not yet covered on a road game this season. They are 0-5 on the road ATS so far. But they do have some pretty good pieces in there. David Elder has historically had some very solid games against this Pirates franchise specifically. And if that passing game does get going, we've seen guys like Donald McKinney and Curtis Ravenel make some pretty impressive plays as pass catchers. So it's just about consistency at this point for Iowa's offense. And the same can be said about their defense as well, which actually, believe it or not, is tied with Orlando right now as the most generous defense in the league, giving up 52.4 points per game. So if you like the on paper by the numbers look, Iowa might have an opportunity for a little bit of offensive upside. As for the Pirates, they return home following a very rough setback against the Sugar Skulls, a team that they were projected to beat. They've had guys in and out of the lineup the past couple weeks, and we've kind of seen the strain that it's had a little bit on an offense that was red hot to start the season. Puka Williams missing the game a couple weeks ago against the Chupacabras. Naquan Murray forced to sit the previous game against the Sugar Skulls with what was reported as an injury. If both those guys come back, along with their other weapons in Tio Redding and Thomas Owens, along with quarterback Paxton DeLaurent, the Pirates, very similar to Iowa, they have an opportunity to get right back to their 50-plus point scoring ways if they can limit the mistakes and keep the chains moving forward. But we've yet to see that defense put together a consistent effort. If you kind of take that New Mexico game at the mall with a little bit of a grain of salt, this is still a team that has given up 50 or more points on the regular. So, they've brought in a whole host of new guys in, like Corian Ballard, Ray Person, both of whom have been very solid in their own right, but we have yet to see that 8-man unit gel. And that's difficult to do when you're trying to solve things on the fly. So this is going to be a very interesting game for both franchises. Definitely a big one for the Pirates in terms of their push for a playoff spot. Time is running out on them a little bit to challenge Green Bay and Jacksonville for what could be a possible home playoff game. So they pretty much have to bank wins from here on out in order to have a conversation there. So all that said, let's discuss picks. Monica liking the under at 96.5, which on its own, I do find a very reasonable play, especially given Iowa's uncertainty at the quarterback position. Really, the scary thing here is the fact that defense is extremely optional for both of these teams. But in the same breath, even if we get like a 56-40 game, this under would be perfectly okay. And while I do have the under on a play a little bit later on, I'm going to go Orlando at minus 13.5. Now, I was on the fence about this initially, given the Pirates' incredibly uncharacteristic struggles at the defensive spot this season. But I will say this as well. This season, some of Orlando's best games have actually been when they got kicked in the teeth during a previous loss. Think back to their first one of the season when Jacksonville kicked their doors in by 28 points. They came right back and battled Green Bay hard in the Resch Center and only lost by 3, which actually stands as the only game this season in which the Blizzard have failed to cover at home. If you count that Green Bay loss as well, that next game against Fishers, they get the game-winning touchdown on the final play of the game. And then after their initial mall disaster against Vegas, in which they lost by 40, they come back and beat the Chupacabras by 30. So there's a pattern there of this team responding when they are hit with that adversity. And then there's also the fact that we stated before that Iowa has not covered in a road game yet this season. And the struggles have been very real for Iowa since their last road win, which actually took place in the 2024 season. So I was also sold on this one by the fact that we are below the key number of 14, which I know I make a big deal about and probably a bigger deal than I probably should. But it's certainly always helpful to get it when you can. And again, we're kind of following along that vein of home teams against the spread. They've covered 2/3 of the time. I think this pick makes sense. So let's see if we can get another Orlando rebound game with the dominant showing against Iowa, a team that they have had mucho success logging no-nonsense wins when they are the home team. All right, with that, let's pivot over to Duval County with the first of 2 7:00 games to go down, in which the Sharks will host the San Antonio Gunslingers. Now, last week, in a very similar matchup, San Antonio was plus 13.5 against Green Bay. they take that same spread number into this game against the Sharks. So plus 13.5 with the over-under at 79.5. On the money line, San Antonio plus 600 and Jacksonville minus 900. So let's first talk about the Gunslingers and their season-long search of a game where they're able to score 40 or more points, which they have not yet done this season. In fact, I believe they're actually the only team in the IFL that hasn't hit the 40-point threshold in the season yet for a single game. Last Friday, they started out with some pretty solid promise. They got touchdowns on their first 2 drives, but they could only put together 2 more scores from that point onwards. They had, I think, a fumble loss, the couple interceptions in the second half, where for the Gunslingers, if they aren't moving the ball downfield, it's been either, 3rd and 10, 4th and 10, trot out Tyler Huddle for a field goal, or some sloppy giveaway, or a bad decision by one of San Antonio's signal callers. So obviously it has not been a great season for them. At the very least, they have been relatively healthy on that front. They've had guys like Glenn Gibbons, Dion McShane, Austin Upshaw ready and available for all of their games so far this season. So there is at least that familiarity, that continuity with personnel. But that offense simply has to get going in these late stages of the season if the Gunslingers want to be playing playoff football for the first time since their NAL days in 2023. What that would also do is help alleviate a defense that we've seen against some of these top offenses. If their respective offense is not working, the defense, as good as it's been, just simply is overmatched. So we saw that scenario play out last week against Green Bay. We also saw it play out in an earlier game that the Gunslingers had at home against the Vegas Nighthawks. So could Jacksonville and their top 3 offense profile similarly in this game? As for the Sharks, they maintain their status as probably the most underrated team in the IFL. Even though they've won now 7 games in a row, sitting with a record of 8-1 and just half game behind Green Bay for the top Eastern Conference spot. They have been simply electric on both sides of the ball. The offense has stolen much of the spotlight with James Cahoon, Jimmy Robinson, and Marco Wade having outstanding seasons. But not to be forgotten in that shuffle, a defense that has been a turnover-generating machine. Whether it's guys like Dylan Brown coming up with an interception, Michael Moore, strip sack fumbles. The Sharks are just in a position where they've got some really good players. They've had some really good results, and they still feel like they have meat on the bone left to pick. So despite their success so far, they're still going to treat each week like they're 0-0 with the mindset that Coach Jason Gibson has carried over to his 26-man team. So my pick for this game, I mentioned it before, my Jacksonville picks have not been good. 2 wins and 7 losses so far. So I'm going to use that as a relatively valid excuse to make my punt play of the week. I'm going to take the Jacksonville Sharks. I'm going to ignore the points, and I'm just going to take him for the outright win here. I know this is going to ruffle a lot of feathers, but I just feel like it's the right choice here. Jacksonville is just playing too dang well right now. I don't see them dropping this game, though it should be noted they did, in fact, lose this game at home to the San Antonio Gunslingers in the late stages of last season, with San Antonio surprising the IFL world with a 46-31 win to close out the year, and in retrospect, keep Jacksonville out of the top 2 in the Eastern Conference standings when all was said and done last season. So perhaps that's another reason why the Sharks go more gusto against their former NAL rival. But But I think this one is just one where I'm not going to overthink it. We're going to see one go through here. Kind of cheated a little bit, but you know what? At 2-7 with specific teams picks, it calls for desperate measures in my mind. So Jacksonville minus 900 is the play there. Once again, I am realizing I forgot to make a correct score prediction for Orlando, Iowa. So for that, I'm going to say Pirates 54 and Barnstormers 36. Whereas for Sharks Gunslingers, I have that settling in at a predicted final score of 49-33, favoring Jacksonville in their quest for an 8th straight win. From there, we move on to the other 7 o'clock kick of the night, a matchup where a provisional playoff spot hangs in the balance as the Tulsa Oilers make the trip to Indiana to take on the Fishers Freight. It is there where the hosts are 2.5-point favorites. The over-under is set at 87.5. The money line shows Tulsa at plus 124, trying for their 3rd straight win, and Fishers at minus 148, trying to snap a 4-game losing streak. So let's talk about Tulsa first. Like we've said, 2 straight wins. They've showed very solid form against San Antonio. They took care of business, no nonsense, against the Iowa Barnstormers last week at home. So the Oilers have quickly turned what was a discouraging 2-5 start into a respectable 4-5 mark where they are still very much alive for a push at the playoffs. With maybe a best case scenario realistically falling about a 3 seed. So for TJ Edwards and the Oilers offense, they've been spot on throughout those pair of contests. The addition of Caleb Ramseur has just unlocked that Tulsa offensive attack where they don't have to rely as much on the arm of TJ Edwards. They can provide balance in the running game, give a dozen carries to Ramseur, let him get his 4 or 5 yards on average as one of the tools used to reliably move the sticks. Now, as for the defense, they've shown up very large against a couple of offenses that have been bottom half of the league so far. They limited San Antonio to 30 points and Iowa to 29 points. So the jump up to playing Fishers' run-heavy attack was going to be a fascinating dynamic to watch. But yeah, the Oilers are in good form in this matchup against a team that they have actually yet to beat. In fact, the Oilers are 0-3 so far all-time against the Fishers Freight. They got swept in both games a season ago, and the Freight ended up taking the first of the meetings this season between these two teams out in Tulsa, with Fishers winning that one 40-38. And that was a win that they logged just prior to their current 4-game losing streak. So part of that losing streak involved a defense that was not great prior to their bye, which was a couple weeks ago. But they came back and battled hard and honestly were a play or two away from upsetting the Sharks in Jacksonville last week. So if you toss out their first loss to the Sharks by 18 points in that sequence, their other 3 losses have only been by 5, 3, and 2 points. So some unfortunate breaks for the Freight, who actually still profile as one of the better teams in the league in terms of net efficiency. Still boasting a top 5 mark at a +6 point difference per 10 possessions. So the defense, with Jaden Rowe having an outstanding all IFL caliber season, definitely looking upwards compared to what they had put out there for an outlook about a month or so ago. So very interesting game here. I think Monica's got it right on the nose here. Very evenly matched, very much a toss-up. And given where home teams typically get favored by 2.5 points anyways as part of that built-in home turf advantage, that's basically saying that the odds makers view this as a dead even game. So Which way am I going to go with it? You guys know me. I'm a stickler for streaks, and there are two of them in this matchup's history that ring true. One of which is that all three games have gone under their respective point totals. But I'm actually going to bank on the other one staying true here. I'm going to take Fishers at that money line number of minus 148. Again, this boils down to the whole concept of Fishers is at home. The last time they were here, they ended up getting, I think it was actually that game against Jacksonville that kind of got away from them near the very end. But I feel like Fishers has gotten rather unlucky in their losing streak. And I do have them as a field goal better on average than Tulsa anyways, ignoring the effects of any home turf advantage one way or the other. So I would actually play this on the spread up to 5.5 if that number was out there. But we're going to take an opportunity here, bank on that strong league-wide trend of teams dominating at home this season. And we're going to see if we can make a nice little 67% return on investment out of it. So Fishers, again, they're one of the better teams in the IFL on the money line this season, like we saw before. So makes every sense in the world to back them here to keep their streak of perfection alive against the Tulsa Oilers. Sometimes this game is all about matchups. So we'll see if that rings true out in Indiana on Saturday night. Moving on to the final game of Saturday, we get the Green Bay Blizzard and the Quad City Steamwheelers doing battle again. Green Bay, whose only loss in their 9-1 mark came in this building against the Steamwheelers. But the hosts are still getting 13.5 here, given recent form. The over-under is 89.5. The money line shows Green Bay at minus 900, Quad City at plus 600. A wacky number that you usually don't see from Quad City as the home team on the money line. So let's talk Green Bay first. The Blizzard, strong case as the best team in the IFL right now. Their 9-1 record entering this game supports that, whereas they have shown incredible talent, incredible skill on both sides of the football. Liam Thompson engineering a top 4 offense in the IFL, whereas on the defensive side, you've got guys like Tefon Grant, Frankie West Jr., spearheading a defense that's right around the top 4, top 5 as well. So a very, very balanced effort from Green Bay that we didn't see as much last season, but maybe those pieces are finally getting put in place for last year's Eastern Conference champions in their bid to get back to Tucson to close out some unfinished business, if you catch my drift. So Green Bay also riding a 6-game winning streak, I believe, since that defeat to the Steamwheelers back in early April. For Quad City, their season has gone a completely opposite trajectory since that win. That put them at 2-2 on the season, but they have actually dropped 5 of their last 6 games since that point. So they are now, I believe, 3-7 on the season. Still within range for a playoff spot, I believe 2 games out. But they need to start banking wins sooner rather than later, and they would love nothing more than a repeat effort from that April 11th outing. In order to accomplish that, though, the offense has to figure out how to take care of the ball, whether it's Daquan Neal, Jared Ware Jr., or one of the receivers, maybe fumbling or tossing an interception. The Steamwheelers offense has committed multiple turnovers in 5 straight games. So, like I said, their best chance to making a run at an upset here is to clean that right up and keep that number as close to 0 as possible. And on the opposite end, on the defense, pretty much put in a similar effort that you did against Green Bay in the first half of the prior meeting. Force the issue on Liam Thompson. Get some pressure up front with guys like Keyshawn Moore and Chimadunga. With that effort there, maybe alleviating the work done by guys like Nick Harris and Trey Smith out in that secondary. So the fall of the Steamwheelers this season, as opposed to their top Eastern Conference regular season finish last year, certainly one of the more shocking surprises of the IFL this season, but not too late to try to flip that narrative and make a push for at least another appearance in the playoffs to keep a 4-season playoff streak alive for Quad City. So let's talk about my pick for this game. It's very counterintuitive, and I don't know how I truly feel about it. But despite their, I believe, 4-game ATS losing streak, I'm going to stick with the home dog here. I feel like Quad City in this rivalry game matchup, we're going to see a little bit of a different version of the Steamwheelers. And I did take a look at the numbers to confirm this. Quad City is actually 0-6 on the road against the spread. And I don't think they have actually ended up winning a game on the road this season. So 0-6 straight up, 0-6 against the spread, which means that their best football has come in this building. 3-1 ATS and 3-1 overall, with that lone loss by a single point against a very good Jacksonville Shark team. So speaking strictly by the numbers and recent history, you've got a case for Quad City to make this a game and perhaps challenge for an outright win. And if we look at Green Bay's road record recently, it's been relatively good, not too shabby. But since the start of last season, they've actually only won one road game by more than this number in that span. So, and that game was a 2025 Week 9 game against the Iowa Barnstormers, where Green Bay got the win by 16 points. So it goes to show you, winning by double digits in the IFL is very hard to begin with. Doing so on the road really adds to that challenge. So this is also a trend with the home underdog that has gone 16-7 league-wide this season. We just need like that A-, B+ game out of Quad City to deliver this result here. If we get 49-39, we're all set. So again, that offense is going to stop turning the ball over eventually. Maybe it's this week where we do finally see the clean game out of the Steamwheelers. So let's see if we can get a strong result from them at home at plus 13.5. So that's Saturday's slate. Now let's dissect Sunday's doubleheader. We will begin things at 4 p.m. Eastern. Third and final matchup of the season between the New Mexico Chupacabras and the Tucson Sugar Skulls. At home, the Skulls are favored by 4.5. The over-under is set at 74.5. The money line is offering New Mexico at plus 180 and Tucson at minus 218. For those familiar at all with the league, I don't think I have to tell you what the prevailing storyline is here. Jerome Johnson, revenge game against the team that he started the season for, and reportedly built up a riff with some coaching staff and other personnel. So let's talk about the Chupacabras first before we get into the Jerome Johnson effect on this game. So the Chupacabras, their last game, very encouraging. Donovan Portery, the 39-year-old veteran, got the start. Kept New Mexico's offense pretty good as compared to their previous results in their 5-game away stretch, which not a particularly high bar to set, but when you average 19.2 per game for 5 games and then make the jump up to 45, you tend to feel pretty good about it. So he seemed to show immediate rapport with receivers like Arthur Jackson, along with Damon Street and Isaiah Crocker. So has that offense been rekindled with that change in quarterback? Or may that have been a product of a long-awaited return to home? So this game against the Sugar Skulls is going to tell a lot about that. So Tucson is obviously going to be fueled by the installation of Jerome Johnson as the quarterback. You put him in, and a team that had struggled under Taz Wilson and Casey Otto suddenly transforms into a 50-plus point offense, which they exhibited that upside in their upset victory against the Orlando Pirates. So Tucson also has Brandon Mackey back. He had, I believe, a few touchdown rushes in the win against the Pirates last week as well. Whereas receivers like Javion Lofton and D'Amico Ewing have also benefited from the addition of Jerome Johnson. The defense, spearheaded by guys like Zach Twardowski and Ahmad Lyons, they've been a bit up and down this season, but when they've been up, we've seen them come up with some spectacular takeaways, with some of those resulting in scores on the defensive side as well. So Tucson at 3-6, but they're right at that tie in 4th place with San Antonio right now. Very much in the conversation to potentially take that spot if they're able to get a good result this week and if San Antonio loses to Jacksonville the day prior. So let's talk pick for this game. Monica looking at Tucson at that minus 4.5 number. Certainly makes a lot of sense, especially given New Mexico's road record so far, in which they have not won. And I think they only have one cover as well, which came in Jacksonville, believe it or not, against the Sharks. So very reasonable play. The one pause I have to that is that Tucson's home record as ATS favorites is not great. Although the last time they did cover at home as a favorite was their last matchup with the Chupacabras a little while ago. So Tucson minus 4.5 would probably be the pick that I make if I dabbled here on the spread. But I'm going to be baited into this over here. 74.5, very small number. And you're going to tell me with this matchup that Jerome Johnson is not going to flirt with 50 points? Come on now. This honestly might be the best value bet, perhaps of the entire week. It's not going to be my mortal mega here. We're going to save that for the Vegas Northern Arizona game that we'll cover momentarily. But if you're a believer that Tucson's offense does have that second life with Johnson, and likewise for the Chupacabras with Donovan Portery, you're going to get 11 touchdowns in this game somewhere. And it's very possible that Tucson might shoulder the load with like 7 or 8 of those touchdowns against a Chupacabra defense, while not horrendously bad. Still is one of the more leaky defenses in the league. I think bottom 3 or bottom 4 in point scoring per game. So this number jumped off the page to me, and I feel like it's too good to pass up. So we'll do a correct score prediction here, along with correct score predictions on the 2 games prior as well. So in this game, I have Sugar Skulls over the Chupacabras 48-39. In that scenario, the game would total 87 points, which would cash our prediction here. For Green Bay Quad City, I have the Blizzard winning that one 50-40. The Oilers in the Freight game, I have Fishers taking care of business there. A final score of 48-42 in a game that might not see a team reach a double-digit lead at any point. It's going to be that close, but with those loose ends tied up, let's wrap up the predictions here for the single games with Vegas, Northern Arizona. The largest spread of the season, once again for the Nighthawks, who are now tasked with covering a 26.5 point spread as the road team against the Wranglers. The over-under is 86.5. Vegas is minus 8,000. Northern Arizona plus 2,200. Look at the defending champions. What more can be said? There's an argument that they are even better this year than they were back in their playoff run in August. A scary development for the rest of the league, as the Nighthawks have just been far and beyond the class of the IFL. Arguably the best offense in the league. Arguably the best defense in the league. Gabriel Rui holding his own and leading the special teams. There's just no weakness right now to this Vegas team, and they have yet to have that classic letdown game. Granted, they have played a ton of opponents recently that, let's be honest, are not in the same stratosphere. Their last game against Quad City, a struggling team. Orlando, a team that had depth issues at the mall in that opening game. Point is, Vegas has won 8 straight games. They have covered in all 8 of those games as the favorite. So now the question becomes, from an objective view, is 26.5 too high of a number? So for Jaden Delora, Josh Tomas, and Quentin Randolph on offense, 2 guys like Lorendo Hernandez and Clifton Duck and Joe Fouché on defense, this is going to be another test for them to see if they can pull out another win by that 4 or more touchdown mark. They've done it pretty dang reliably this season, but now Northern Arizona will have home turf advantage to try to throw a little bit of a wrinkle in that. The Wranglers are playing a top 3 team in the West for a 3rd consecutive week. They had lost by 24 against Arizona last week, lost by 32 against San Diego the week before. So the return home comes at a good time for them. The last time that we saw Anthony Garrett take the field in Prescott Valley, he led a 57-point onslaught to defeat the Iowa Barnstormers in what stands as Northern Arizona's only win of the season right now. Looking at a record of 1-8 there. The big issue that has derailed Northern Arizona since then is the defense that had been reasonably solid prior to that stretch just get completely outclassed by the likes of the Strike Force and the Rattlers. The Strike Force putting up 67 points, the Rattlers putting up 56 points, with touchdowns on all but I think 2 or 3 of those drives, the meaningful drives at least, to get that. So for the Wranglers as a whole team, both offensively and defensively, this is an opportunity at a bounce back. So this will probably be more of a formality from a practical standpoint, but there's a lot of interesting facets here to look at for both that spread and the point total. So my pick for this game is going to be a vouch for IFL betting history. Like we said before, Vegas has covered in 8 straight. One more cover would tie them with San Diego for the longest ATS cover streak in the IFL's betting history. The Strike Force stretching their streak from the end of the 2023 season to midway through the 2024 season at that 9-game mark. So Mortal Megamax, again, not sure if it's the right play, but we're going to take the chance. Vegas, max bet, minus 26.5. It's a big number. It is a big number. And if Northern Arizona can do what they've done the past couple weeks and get to a number in the 30s. I want to say they actually got to 30. They've gotten to 32 and 35 points. So, for sake of argument, if they get to 35 points, Vegas must score at least 62. That is how purely objectively ridiculous that this number really is. So, if you're taking that minus 26.5, you know that the Nighthawks are going to get their 50 plus offensively. They might even flirt with 60 here. But do you trust that Vegas Nighthawk defense to potentially put in that full 60-minute effort and possibly prevent a possible backdoor cover situation? It's going to be tough. But again, we could easily see a scenario here where the Wranglers get held to 21, Vegas makes it to 63, and we call it a day. But let's go with it. We're here. Let's take a chance. Vegas minus 26.5. As I said before, the mortal Megamax of the week. Correct score prediction for this one. I've got the Wranglers at 30 and the Nighthawks at 61. So again, Vegas could win by 30 and we would definitely be sweating that. So very, very interesting game to close out the week. All right. Now, before we take off for the weekend, let's talk parlays. So last week attempt, that one didn't do so well. We only got one correct out of 3. First week since week 8, where we had more losses than wins, actually. But we get another clean slate here. Let's see if we can capitalize on it. My first pick is going to bank on that home team ATS 41-20 overall record. And we're going to go Jacksonville here with the Sharks. Even with last week's ATS loss by the hook, they're still an impressive 8-4 against the spread in this building at VyStar Veterans Memorial Arena. And again, 2 of those losses, ATS, were when they were double-digit favorites, which does happen to be the case here. But the matchup against San Antonio, who is a league worst 2-7 against the spread this season, again, makes this a fairly reasonable pick. And I think I said it before, this is a very similarly profiling matchup to what San Antonio had to go through last week against the Green Bay Blizzard. So another situation, we're getting this below the key number of 14. You never know if that could prove to be the difference. I thought we were below the key number of 3 last week, but, special team shenanigans happen. So we'll hope that those get corrected this week and that Jacksonville can put together a solid, impressive outing. My final score prediction for this game had the Sharks at a 16-point margin of victory. I view Jacksonville's upside at 50-plus points to be very reasonable. So we'll see if their defense can keep San Antonio's offense in a little bit of a lull. So Jacksonville plus 13.5 to kick this thing off. The remaining picks of my parlay here will both be on Sunday. And we'll start things off with eating up a little bit of juice here. We'll take the Tucson Sugar Skulls to win their game outright against the Chupacabras. Now, again, this banks on home teams being absolutely outstanding throughout the season. And what better way to hop on that train and ride it out than with a matchup where the opposing team as the visitors are coming in with a record of 1-8. And by the way, the Chupacabras have yet to win a game on the road in their resurrection season. So again, just boils down to Jerome Johnson and that revenge game narrative. Like, I don't see a scenario here where the Sugar Skulls fail to reach at least 45, 46 points. It could be a bloodbath, but, that plus 4.5 is there for a reason. New Mexico may be given a little benefit of the doubt here. So We'll see if Tucson can ride out this hot streak. We'll see if they can complete the series sweep of 3 games against the Chupacabras. It's always hard to beat the same team 3 times in the same season, as the adage goes, but we'll see if Tucson can take care of business to bring us to our third leg, which is going to be Vegas, Northern Arizona. I'm going to tab the over here at 86.5. And once more, this boils down to, we know Vegas is going to carry this the majority of the way. If you consider 54 points as their floor, we just need Northern Arizona to get to 33. 4 touchdowns plus a little bit of special teams change, which on that front, we've actually seen Manny Higuera have some of his better games when he's at Prescott Valley. Multiple games with multiple deuces. Some pretty solid track record on field goal attempts. So if it does have to come to that for the Wranglers every so often in this game, they'll at least have a proven weapon that's proven his track record in terms of reliability at least putting some points on the board on a pretty consistent basis. Vegas is also one of the league's better over-under teams on the season, like we said before. Their games averaging 91 points per game. 6-3 record to the over is third best in the IFL. And 7 of their past 8 games have cleared this number, including last week against Quad City, where despite only allowing 28 points to the Steamwheelers, their 61 points that they scored on offense vaulted the total to 89. So we'll look for a similar game script there. To wrap up our 3-leg parlay, we finish out with odds of plus 431. A $10 bet would turn into $53.16 if we do get it right. So here's to hoping for that third winner of the season. Again, our goal is 4 throughout the course of the 2026 season. That would, in every shred of likelihood, put us at a net positive for those attempts this season. So we will recap it here once more for you if you would like to follow along or completely take the opposite of what I do, which has happened once this season. But for those who are showing the faith, Jacksonville minus 13.5 to kick it off, Tucson on the money line as the middle point, and Vegas, Northern Arizona over 86.5 to close out the week. And if all goes well, a winning parlay for plus 431. All righty, just under 80 minutes into the stream, and we will wrap things up here. I want to thank you again so much for hopping on, talking shop. It is a joy to have some fellow fans out there who share the same passion of the game. For those of you who will be placing bets on the IFL this weekend, I wish you the very best of luck. And as always, I will see you at the cashier. Have a great weekend.